Hi, this is Professor Stugard, and in this video, we're going to get started with using the Python programming language. So, the way we're going to use Python in this class is through the IDE, or basically the interface that we're going to access through Anaconda. And through Anaconda, we'll access Jupyter Notebooks, which is what we're going to use. And so you're going to see that even though when we do our coding, it will be web-based, and we're going to do our coding in a web browser, we do still want to download Anaconda to our home computer. So this is anaconda.com. And again, you can see this is data science technology for a better world. You're just going to download Anaconda. For Windows, again, we're downloading the Anaconda distribution, and then once that finishes downloading, you're going to find where you downloaded that file to, run the executable, and install Python or install Anaconda on your computer so that we can use Python. All right, I want to pause the video while I install Anaconda, and I'll show you what it looks like when it gets started up. All right, so I downloaded, I installed Anaconda, and when I first open up Anaconda, this is what shows up. And so we have a bunch of different options for different types of things we might want to do when it comes to data science or machine learning. And so, you'll even see things like RStudio here, Jupyter Lab, a whole bunch of other things. What we're going to be using in this class is the Jupyter Notebooks here. And so I'm going to launch my Jupyter Notebook. And you're going to see it now opens up a web browser. So my default web browser is Mozilla Firefox, so it's going to automatically open a new Firefox window or open a new tab, and now we have kind of our Jupyter Notebook landing page. So the thing is, I can actually go through and I can scan the different programs that I've written and stored on different places on my computer. But for now, again, we're going to kind of start one from scratch. So you'll see over here in that right corner where it says new, we're going to click new, and we want a Python 3 notebook, because again, we're going to be using Python 3. And if I click this, we get an open tab, and so we see a bunch of different things. But first, we have our main cell where we have our blinking cursor here, and this main cell is basically going to act as kind of our console. So I can do different math problems. So let's say I want to do 2 plus 5. Now what you want to recognize that if I press enter, it's just going to go down to the next line because it's going to let me type multiple lines of code in each one of these cells. If I want to run the code, I can either hold shift and enter, or I can press the run button. So I can go back up here, and the nice part is it's going to save every input, and then I can adjust kind of on the fly. So I just did 2 plus 5 as my input. My output was 7, and I can go back and change that. Well, what was 2 plus 8? And hit run. Oh, and it's going to update my output now. And again, that's how we can use Python to kind of do some basic math type problems. We can also run our functions as well in our input cells. So let's use the function print, because print is going to, well, basically display something. We can see that as we start typing print, as soon as I get to the word actually print, it turns green, letting me know that I'm, again, using a function. We still need our parentheses to define the arguments of our function, what we want the function to do. In this case, we just want it to print, so we're going to go with the stereotypical first program for everybody. And I want to type the phrase hello world. I do need to put it in quotes. Again, Python needs to recognize that this is a string of characters that it's trying to print. So we put it in quotes, and hello world. And if I run my code, again, either hit shift enter or run, well, there we go. It's going to print hello world for me. So again, that's really nice. It lets us print our outputs. One of the most important things that we're going to do, obviously, with programming is being able to store variables or store tables or matrices or whatever it is we're going to store. And the way we store things in Python is we put the variable name on the left, then an equal sign, and then whatever we want to store. So let's say I want to create my introduction. So my introduction, that's going to be the name of my variable, and I have the equal sign, and then in that variable intro, I'm going to store my name is Prof Stu. And I can run that. And then notice how there's no output because all I was doing was storing a variable. There's no output associated with that. However, I can now use my print function. And actually, I'm going to go back and use that same cell. I can press enter again to do multiple lines inside the same cell. And now I'm going to print. And now I'm just going to type my intro, which is my variable name. I don't need quotes here because, again, the quotes were part of my variable that I stored as intro. And now if I run this, my name is Prof Stu. All right. So again, we store variables by using the equal sign. And again, so it's the variable name that we're going to use to the right and the other one to the left. And so again, we can do this with numbers as well. So I can say x equals 3. Actually, no, I'm going to do it in multiple lines. X equals 3, y equals 4, and then I can do multiple math problems as well. So then I can tell it to do what's x times y and what's x plus y. And now I can run this, and it only did that last line, the x plus y. Why didn't it do the x times y? Well, we do need to be careful. It's only going to output the last line unless we tell it to do something else. So I could do x plus y, and let's say we store that. So z equals x plus y, and then maybe w equals x plus y. So now I'm going to store those variables. So now, again, I've run it. Nothing gets printed. And it would only print the last line anyway. And now I can say print my variables z and w. And now I have both my variables printed. Because again, it's only going to output necessarily the last line that I type. All right. Now, as we play around with Python, and again, hopefully you're kind of playing around with me, you can always delete these cells as well. We can definitely get rid of them. So let's say we don't want this one anymore. Well, we'll cut that deleted cell. We'll get rid of it. We'll take this deleted cell. I want to cut it and get rid of it. All right. Now, another nice part about Python is that, again, a lot of the inputs kind of make sense, and it makes it a fairly user-friendly type of programming language to use. And so let's write kind of our first program that's going to ask for inputs from the user and then give us an output. So if I want something inputted, right, and I want to store it in memory, I need to first give it a variable name. So let's say name equals, and I want to input, and again, my function now is input, and so it's going to store into the variable that I just called name, and the input, well, what I want the computer to print to show us is going to be in quotes in that input function. So inside the input function, I'm just going to ask, what is your name? Question mark. And now if I run this, I get a new line that says, what is your name? And an entry box. So I can say Prof Stu, press enter, and now the variable name, oops, now I can say print name, run that code, and it is Prof Stu. So again, the nice part about these notebooks too is notice how I stored my variable in this cell, and I was still able to call it again later on in the cell. So again, when storing these variables in the environment, and we can't explicitly see the environment the way this is set up right now, but it is storing these values in the environment for us to recall in different cells. If we want to, again, kind of write a whole program that does many different things in our notebook. Now, what you want to be careful about, though, is accidentally overwriting variables, because I could go back to, say, intro. If I rename intro to the word name and run my code, yeah, it doesn't look like I changed anything here because it's still printing intro, and intro was still stored the same way. But now if I go down here to print the name, it changed the name. So again, you want to be very careful when you use variables in any programming language, and make sure that you kind of keep track of them and they don't get reused or overwritten when you don't want them to be overwritten, especially when you pick kind of common things like, say the words intro and name. But all right. So I'm going to get rid of these cells. So let's say I want to do something kind of more complicated. I want to input, and again, my name. We have that for step 1. Again, I'm going to just press regular enter, get another line, and I'm going to do another input, age, and input. Actually, I'm going to do it a little differently. Actually, I'm going to create my variable as the year, and I'm going to say the input is what year were you born? All right. And so now I can run my code. What is your name? Prof. Stu. I press enter, and now it's asking my second question. What year was I born? 1985. Now, if you notice how these are kind of close to each other, we're writing, our entry is right after the question mark here. Inside the quotes, again, all my outputs are going to mean curly or new. If we add extra spaces, it will definitely help with the clarity when we do typing and inputs and outputs. So if I put an extra space after those quotes, now when I run it, what is your name? Prof. Stu, what year were you born? 1985. See, now I have that space and it will look a little bit nicer. Now here's the thing though, because if I type year and I want to see what I get, my output is 1985, but notice how it's in the single quotes? Well, what that means is that it stored 1985 as a string. And remember, just like any other programming language, the way we store variables, there are different data types. So we have strings, which are our characters or kind of names. Then we have integers, which are just integer values. We have doubles, which are our decimal values. And again, there's a bunch of other data types as well. So if I want to store this input as an integer, because again, right, the year I'm born is going to be considered an integer, I need to turn it into an integer using the int function. All right, so I'm going to type that here, int. All right, so that's going to be a function itself. And I can combine that with my code from earlier. So the year, int, we'll turn it into an integer. And we can see that we would end up with other errors as well. So let's say the next thing I want to do here is figure out, all right, if I know your name and what year you were born, let's try to figure out what your age is going to be. So your age would equal, so again, I'm going to create a new variable called age, and I'm going to take the current year, 2022, minus the year that we stored. All right. And that's going to tell me what the age is. We're going to store that as a variable. So if I run this code now, what is my name? Prof. Stu. What year was I born? 1985. And then, I'm getting an error message. And so, again, we're going to get lots of error messages. So the nice part is, again, the Jupyter Notebook is a really great interface because the error messages are pretty specific and tell you exactly where the issue happened. And so in this case, we have this big arrow. It happened in line 3, which is the age equals 2022 minus the year. And the type of the error is we have an unsupported operand type, the minus sign, and we have an integer and a string. So 2022 was an integer, but the year was stored as that string. And so we get that error message that we can't subtract an integer and a string. They need to be the same data types. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to use that integer function, int, parentheses, and put that around the input for what year I was born. So it's going to take the input, what year were you born, and then I need to put the integer function to make sure it gets stored as an integer when I input it. We also need to make sure that our parentheses match up, and so we need an extra parenthesis at the end as well, right? There's two left parentheses. We need to make sure at the end that there's the two right parentheses. All right, so let's run this code again. What is your name? Prof. Stu. What year were you born? 1985. And now it runs, and there are no issues with my code. I got no error messages. And if I go ahead and run year, notice how 1985 no longer has the quotes. And if I run age, again, it's going to return 37, again, without any quotes. So I inputted the name and the year you were born. The last thing I want to do to this program is I'm going to add another line, and I want to print, and I'm going to print a message about the age. So I'm going to say, let's see. Actually, I'm going to do it this way. So we stored the name. So name plus, and this is a really cool part about the print function and in Python. And again, this is actually similar to Java and a few other programming languages as well. I can use the plus sign to concatenate or combine strings together here. So name, which would be Prof. Stu, and then in quotes, turns, and I want the word turns, then the plus sign, and then I'm going to type the age, that variable we stored, and then another plus sign, and then quotes, this year, and a period. All right, so let's run this. Again, it's not going to be perfect. You might even have seen my issue here, but let's take a look. So what is your name? Prof. Stu. What year were you born? 1985. And shoot, I get another error message. All right. So again, now it says my error is on line 4. My print function, name plus turns plus age plus this year. It says we can only concatenate strings, not integers. So the nice part is all I need to do now is, well, my age was stored as a number, right? Well, I need it to be stored as a string. The way I store it as a string is going to be the function str. All right, so this function str is going to turn something into a string for us. So I need age to be a string. So the nice part is, again, I am going to put that function where I stored age. So what this is going to do, again, it works from the inside out, just like order of operations. We do the innermost parentheses, right? We do the arguments inside of our functions first. And so it's going to take the 2022 minus the year I was born as an integer. It's going to get that value. And then it's going to turn it into a string by using that str function. All right, so we'll run it again. What is your name? Prof. Stu. What year were you born? 1985. Prof. Stu turns 37 this year. Oh, shoot. See how it's all smushed together? Like I said, we have to add those spaces inside of our quotation marks to really format this properly. So I need a space on both sides of the word turn and a space at the beginning of the phrase this year. That way I have enough spaces and everything will look good. Okay, last try. What is my name? Prof. Stu. What year was I born? 1985. Prof. Stu turns 37 this year. Nice. So we can do inputs and outputs. And again, the Python language is pretty user-friendly that way. And if I want to, again, I can always click on these and cut any cells that I don't need. So one of the important things is that we should label all of our notebook files as well. So this is Untitled 6. I should really call this something else. So maybe name and age. And we will rename it. So now it's called name and age. And again, the nice part is this will be stored in Jupyter. You'll be able to access it. If you want to export it, which means you want to be able to actually save it as a Python file or as an HTML file, download as, and then we have a couple choices. So again, HTML, Markdown file, Jupyter Notebook, and again, the Jupyter Notebook's pretty good. Or we can just store it as a Python file, which means it'll work on any Python interface, not necessarily just the Jupyter Notebooks or other interfaces like that. So I'm going to do it as .py for now. All right, so it's saved it. I can see it in my downloads here as name and age. I'm going to open it. And so again, you might not find the file, the way to open it. And so I'm going to open it using Notepad. And so we can see here, I know it might look kind of small, but name and age, again, we have Python, the coding, integer 1, or input 1, I'm sorry, print the hello world, and input 2, we have my code, the name, year, age, and so on. All right, so that's the basics about the Python notebooks. You should absolutely go ahead and play around a little bit, practice in the console, store some variables, add, subtract, multiply, divide, do some inputs, do some outputs. You do have a coding assignment, kind of similar to what we just did with the name and age, which you are going to be responsible for, and you will need to export and then save to Blackboard as well. But again, just play around with it at first, and in the next video, we're going to go more in depth with how we do math in Python, particularly the math of machine learning. So have fun playing around, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.